President Trump delivered a stunning message to Jewish voters today. If you vote for Democrats, you're stupid, or, as he says it, disloyal. He didn't spell it exactly, but that's the extreme he's gone to fire up partisan division around Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Last week, the Michigan Democrat was banned from taking a trip to Israel before being granted permission to visit her grandmother on the West Bank. And after declining to make the trip, Tlaib delivered an emotional press conference yesterday criticizing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and denouncing Israel's travel restrictions. It prompted a new round of attacks from the president, who tweeted today, "Sorry, I don't buy Representative Tlaib's tears. I have watched her violence, craziness, and most importantly, words for far too long. Now tears. She hates Israel and all Jewish people. She's an anti-Semite. She and her three friends are the new face of the Democrat Party. Live with it." That's Trump talking. Trump then resumed his attack this afternoon, offering this message to any voters who cast ballots for any Democrats.
I think any Jewish people that vote for a Democrat, I think it shows either a total lack of knowledge or great disloyalty. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Well, as the Washington Post points out now, critics on both sides of the aisle immediately pointed out that Trump's use of the word disloyalty echoed anti-Semitic tropes, accusing Jews of dual loyalty or dual allegiance. But this isn't the first time the president has spoken to Jewish voters in just this way. Speaking to a group of Jewish Republicans early this year, Trump referred to Benjamin Netanyahu as your prime minister, even though he was talking to Republicans, actually talking to Republican Americans. Let's watch.
I stood with your prime minister at the White House to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights.
American Republicans, of course. When he was a candidate in 2015, Trump also told a Jewish audience that he didn't want their money.
I know why you're not going to support me. And, you know, you're not going to support me because I don't want your money.
For more, I'm joined by Democratic Congresswoman Susan Wild of Pennsylvania, Jon Meacham, NBC News historian, Michael Steele, former RNC chairman, and Eli Stokols, White House reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Congresswoman, it's great to have you on tonight, but not for this reason, obviously. Dual loyalty, craziness, religious tests. I mean, I've never heard. I mean, this sounds like Ed Koch in the bad old days of New York City with real tribal warfare of fire. Here's the president saying to Jewish voters who vote about 70% generally Democrat, stop doing that, because that would be disloyal to being what? Jewish? Your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly the question. Disloyal to whom or to what? As a Democratic Jewish member of Congress, I am personally offended, and I think most Jews in this country would be. We separate our faith and our politics for the most part, and to suggest that they are one and the same, I find to be offensive.
Let me go to Jonathan, my friend Jonathan Meacham, because this is history at work here. Often, I find it happen, the older I get, the more I find history crashing into present time. This is awful stuff. This tells people you must vote by identity, by religion. You must vote a certain way. Your partisanship, your politics must be arrayed by your cultural background, blah, blah, blah. It's a religious test. He's saying you must vote a certain way. Vote for me because there's somebody on the Democratic left in Michigan you may not agree with on Israeli government politics.
Yeah. The first liberty of American life was religious liberty. It's one of our great contributions to Western culture. Madison and Jefferson, before they got to the Constitution or Republic, were arguing that, as Jefferson once put it, it doesn't matter whether my neighbor worships one god or 10 gods or 20 gods. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my neck. And that insight that, in fact, we could have liberty of conscience and create a republic was uniquely American, partly because of the terrible experience, and this is in the 18th century. We don't even got into the 20th century horrors about this. The insight was that the old world had been riven with dispute and chaos and bloodshed over religious struggles. And the great project of America, however poorly realized in the beginning, the great project of America was that if you assented to the idea of the country, that we're all created equal, therefore you could be an American. It didn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter where you worshiped. It didn't matter if you worshiped at all.
You know, Michael, Trump did this to me one time. He takes your religious background and he shoves it at you and says, well, you might, he says, how can you be pro-choice? Well, a lot of Catholics are pro-choice. We have our own beliefs about life and we accept them in the teaching authority of our church. But when it comes to the Constitution, we accept it. Life is complicated.
Right.
Trump thinks everybody does everything according to their identity. You're not allowed to have an opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
Exactly.
largely how he sees the world, and this is another play in it. All I can say from this comment, as abhorrent and disrespecting as it is, we need to just settle in, because this is just the warm-up of what will be a series of narratives created by the president around particular interest groups. You know, when you sit down and you say this about the Jewish community, then what about African Americans?
Yeah.
What about Hispanics? You know, how they vote.
Well, he wants you to vote against them.
And he wants you to, right. He wants you to vote against
that's
them.
the game he's playing.
But the Jewish vote should be voting Republican.
Yeah.
And so this, I think, is something in stark contrast to what we saw in 2016. I think it's going to be more personal and a little bit more in depth. It's going to cut, to your point, Chris, it's going to cut a little closer to the bone for a lot of Americans when they have their religion shoved in their face and a litmus test of how they vote based on that religion.
Eli, your thoughts about this? I think it's the front page, top of the story. Top of the fold story tomorrow morning. I think it's a big story. Trump using religion politically. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a big story in the context of a president saying something that maybe unwittingly that is anti-Semitic, and yeah, but
your prime minister.
But, you know, it's also, this is the Trump presidency, so it's hard to gauge what's a big story because everybody has seen him make so many stereotypical statements that are offensive to a lot of groups, and he'll say afterwards, well, you know, like, loosen up. This is how people talk. I don't know what's a big story anymore or what isn't, and I say that as somebody who covers this administration every day. But I do think that it's clear what Michael's talking about. This is a guy who wants people to look at the Democratic Party and see these four very progressive women of color. He wants people to see them. He wants them to see them as militant. He doesn't want them to see Joe Biden or some of the people running for president. And so he's going to couch that in, look, I'm standing up against anti-Semitism, because he's ostensibly upset over Representative Omar's anti-Semitism. Doesn't even seem to realize that he's attacking her in a way that is just as anti-Semitic. He's effectively doing the same thing, trafficking in the same sort of trope that he's supposed to be upset about.
Yeah.
And he's saying, look at this. And so it's just, it confuses everything, and it just makes everything incredibly tribal. But he's almost trying to protect himself from the charge that he's stirring up anti-Muslim sentiment by saying, look, I'm just standing up against anti-Semitism.
Congresswoman, it's so great to have you on, because I know every time you have a meeting up there in Allentown or wherever, New Tripoli, anywhere you're up to, my brother lives up there, you've got to deal with the myriad of American backgrounds. I mean, even in a place up there, there's all kinds of backgrounds in the room when you meet. You've got to bring them together. It's called politics in America. Unite people. This guy seems to be looking for the wedges. Let's get the Jews over here. Let's get the people who don't like what the people said about it. People have said about it. Let's get everybody fighting over four people on the Democratic left, and let's make that the fight. Because he can't fight anywhere near the middle lines. Your thoughts?
And you know, Chris, you mentioned the voters that I meet, and among them a number of American Jews. And what I have found is, first and foremost, American Jews are American. And like all voters, they have a wide variety of issues that they care tremendously about, whether it's health care, education, jobs, making sure that their retirement is secure. These are the issues that unite people across the country. And our president has no business trying to divide people based upon their religion or politicizing people's religion and trying to tell them that they have to vote in one way if they are of a certain religion. And the other thing that I want to say is being Jewish is also very much a cultural issue. It's not just about religion. And the president seems to fail to understand that. It is about understanding the deep, important issues that affect all people in the world, but particularly in this case, in the United States.
Why do conspiracies seem to be find a home with this president, John? I think it's like market volatility. As long as you got the people all thinking, who shot this? You know, Ted Cruz's father had something to do with killing Kennedy. Get it all up in the air. Completely crazy. Everybody afraid of everybody else. Everybody suspecting the other ethnic groups or religious groups or racial groups, whatever. Everybody's mad with everybody. And Trump feels that in that crazy 52-card pickup world he wants to live in, he wins. Explain, John, because he does think he can win with craziness around him.
Well, he did. And so that's why
right.
I think
That's
he continues to think. I don't think it's much more complicated. He believes that in the kind of chaos theory, that if we're talking about this, he can point out, oh my God, what are we now, the lamestream media, whatever we are today, they're talking about this, they're negative, and then it gets lost in this kind of, to go to Eli's point, it gets lost in this mad chaos of the Trump era. And I think I struggle with this all the time, and I think you do too. At some point, you have to decide, do you always call him out on things? And if you always call him out, are you somehow enabling? Are we part of this abusive drama in the country right now? And the answer is we have to. Because the only way to see our way through this, it seems to me, is to continue to bear witness and to say this is not who we should be. To some extent, it is who we are. This is a long debate. People say this isn't who we are. Well, it kind of is. The country is not perfect. The goal has always been a more perfect union. But our greatest leaders, and President Kennedy went to Houston as a candidate and talked about this. Jefferson, in the beginning, said his statute for religious liberty was meant, as he put it, to comprehend within the mantle of its protection the Jew, the Gentile, the Hindu, the Mohammedan, and the infidel of every denomination. He just listed it all out. And he said, you have to have the freedom to do what you want to do here. That's what sets us apart. And what the president's doing is, instead of figuring out what sets us apart, he's tearing us apart.
Well, referring to recent press coverage of his unfavorable polling numbers, Trump today issued a cryptic tweet threatening the media. He said the lamestream media is far beyond fake news. They are treading in very dangerous territory. Well, that remark referenced his tweet yesterday saying, quote, despite all the fake news, my poll numbers are great. Think what they'd be if I got fair media coverage. Eli, this whole thing, threatening the media, there is sort of a, totalitarian sound to that. What's he going to do? And threatening Fox because they've got an honest poll?
Well, it's very authoritarian, but this is what Trump has been doing all along. There's this fog machine, and there's all these ideas that he has that, everybody's sort of out to get him. So when something happens and it's happening in plain sight, he explains it away by saying the media is out to get me, or the deep state, the FBI, the Justice Department, they are out to get me. He's always the victim when something is rises up in reaction to his behavior. He hires people who are doing things that need to be investigated, their investigations, and then he says, look, I told you, it's the deep state. He's lying and delivering all these false statements all the time. The media is always in a fact-checking pose, and then he points at us and says, see, they're so negative, they're out to get me. So there's this self-fulfilling prophecy aspect of this where a lot of his behaviors and actions are provoking these responses that he then explains as, see, everything is biased, and he paints everything with that brush.
I like to give him a fact he can't stand. It's you, Congresswoman. You're a congresswoman now because the voters elected you in the last election. That's a fact Trump doesn't want to face. All you new members from the suburbs around Philly, except for Bucks Kennedy, was a sweep, as you know, all women, I think. And you won because people wanted a change from Trump. That's a fact. That's
exactly right, and I think
to put it bluntly,
I think the president is trying very hard to be a distractor in chief. He wants to distract us from the fact that last year the House majority was created by a whole lot of people who were elected from districts like mine, frontline districts, very purple districts, an equal number of Democrats, Republicans, and a healthy dose of independents thrown in. And that's deeply concerning, I think, to the president. And that's why he is resorting to division politics. He is literally trying to keep his head above water by dividing us as much as possible. And I think John's absolutely right. We have to call him out on this every single time. Because we can't have a president who doesn't recognize the role of the president to be a uniter. And that's what we really need. And I will tell you that my Democratic caucus that I'm part of is very much united in many, many ways. And the voters who voted us in last year care about issues that are important to every American person. It doesn't matter whether they're Jewish or a Christian or other. It is, they are the issues that I mentioned before: healthcare, education, jobs. Those are the things that we're focused on, and all he wants to do is talk about things that will divide us.
You know, Michael, there's a long respected leader of what's called Jewish Republicans, Matt Brooks. I've known him for a long time. This guy has the job of helping get votes, Republican votes from the community, which is generally votes Democrat.
Right.
So where's he going to deal with this baby?
Well, yeah, I mean,
this assault on religious identity and trying to claim you must vote your group.
You've already had an organ of the Republican Party, the Republican Jewish group, come out and sort of back the president up. So you're going to have some reinforcements that way.
So
guys,
toadyism is general these days.
Well, yeah. What else is he going to do? What can he do? The reality of it is Trump has consistently put the party in a position where it has to defend the indefensible, to the point where it's so weak-kneed now, it has no other choice but to stand right next to him and go, what he said. And so the reality for us politically on the right, on the Republican side, going into next year's election, is that now you've got one more group, one more community of individuals that's going to make that conversation much, much harder to get their vote for our candidate.
All I hear is gunfire on Fifth Avenue. He keeps shooting people on Fifth Avenue, and he keeps getting away with it. Thank you, U.S. Congresswoman Susan Welch. Congratulations on representing wonderful Allentown, New Tripoli, and those wonderful places in Pennsylvania. Jon Meacham, thank you so much. Michael Steele, as always. Eli Stokols, sir, our great reporter here. We needed one objective reporter here.